Well, you might hear the wind whipping in the background here at Elmwood Loft today as we are recording this podcast in literally the thick of the blizzard of 2026. Governor McKee, a little bit ago, making that declaration as the travel ban continues. And I just look out the window right now, and it is definitely going to be a lot of things. Number one, it's going to be a test for all of us to dig out and figure out how we get back to some sense of normalcy, maybe tomorrow. Or at least Wednesday. And then, of course, there's a lot of political questions. How will this storm serve as a response opportunity for Mayor Smiley in Providence? In general, what will the response be? That's stuff we're going to continue to look at this week. But today, we go inside communications with Half Street Group founder and president Mike Raia as we take a look at weather communications on Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Stay safe, folks. Again, we are broadcasting from the middle of this blizzard here at Elmwood Loft. Luckily, our power's still on, and I wanted to make sure to get this episode complete and out to you in the case that changes. Just pay attention to relevant updates. Of course, that's an obvious statement, and we will bring you anything that comes across our desk that we think you need to know. We are brought to you in part by Half Street Group. They bring a new generation's perspective to leadership communications, strategic public relations, and digital marketing. Half Street helps organizations and leaders take control of their own stories and manage their reputations. They get results for their clients by focusing on audience message and culture, and by leveraging their decade-long relationship with media and opinion leaders in the Ocean State and throughout New England. Learn more at halfstreetgroup.com. In the middle of a blizzard, Mike Raia joins us here on Bartholomew Town. Sir, how's it looking in the East Bay, wherever you are right now?
Man, I mean, I feel like I'm living in an igloo right now. I like that you're also in your snow gear. I think we're all going to be trapped in our houses for at least the next 18 hours. But it's kind of cool. Like, I mean, my kids are home. Like, we had some flickering lights this morning, but everything seems to be moving in the right direction right now. And we'll dig out once the snow stops.
One thing that comes to mind with the snow, it kind of just continues some of the spirit from the hockey magic over the weekend. Your take right there. U.S. men's hockey winning first time since 1980, winning gold at the Olympics. What the Olympics are being watched this year in a way that I think it's probably because also social media's new role and drones, and there's so much about it. But this feels like it matters in a way that it wouldn't have mattered maybe a couple of years ago.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love the Olympics every time it comes through. Every 2 years, just being able to find that escape, and I think like hats off to Peacock, like having the gold medal or the Gold Zone channel makes it so easy to just lose yourself in that, and particularly with the time difference. Like I love being able to get up in the morning, saunter down into my living room at 6 a.m. and put something on and be able to watch something compelling, watch something that has a little bit of competition to it. All of it was great. And I think, like, to your point, like the social media with the drone coverage, like Gen Z has really figured out how to make this a multi-screen endeavor. And I have found myself following more athletes whose names I did not know 2 weeks ago than I care to admit. And the content that they're making is great. The way that they keep us engaged is great. And then being able to see all of it come through on the other side, like that U.S.-Canada gold medal game, both of the U.S.-Canada gold medal games were amazing hockey to watch. And for those, my son plays, I grew up watching hockey. But for those that don't, what an introduction to that sport. And hopefully it translates in, particularly on the women's side, with PWHL and with high caliber women's college hockey out there. Like, that sport, that game is getting faster and faster and more skilled. So what a great introduction to all of that. And just having some of those collective moments that we don't necessarily get in kind of the age of streaming and the age of YouTube, when you can watch whatever you want to watch on your own timeline.
Right. And look, for this community as well, coming off the heels of, and we're still living through it, no doubt, the absolutely horrendous tragedy at the Pawtucket hockey rink. There was a little something there as well. I mean, for the hockey community, in which I'm not directly part of, but we certainly have gotten to know a lot better over these last days in the wake of the Pawtucket tragedy. This was a really powerful and unifying moment that uplifted, even for just a split second, that portion of the community impacted by the events that took place in Pawtucket. So I was just so happy to see it.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And that tragedy, I mean, that hit close to home for us. That was the rink that my son learned to play hockey at. I spent, God, countless Saturday and Sunday morning hours at Lynch. Just horrifying. But there is something special about the way that those kind of that close knit youth sports communities are able to come together and provide support to each other. And it's bigger than sports. It's the things that kids learn, the things that families learn, whether it's on the ice or on a little league field or on a soccer pitch, and unfortunately, the tragedy that kind of put that front and center, that camaraderie and that support that we see. I do hope that people are able to recognize that same kind of support, that same kind of solidarity exists outside of tragedy as well. And it did. I think that you're right. It is kind of nice to be able to see that unifying moment. I think one of the most heartfelt things that I saw on social media after the USA match, the USA game yesterday, was a video. I don't know where it's from. I don't know where this Pee Wee hockey team was, but they were about to take a face-off, and all of the parents started cheering because they were second screening their kid's game, watching the overtime. And when Jack Hughes scored the goal, the parents started screaming, and the kids realized what happened. And the referees just said, "Timeout." We're all like, and the kids rushed to the bench, and they acted as though they just won the cup, or that they just won the gold medal. And I think that does go to what the kind of joy of sport and unification of sport, because we even saw it, I think, throughout the Olympics. And 3 weeks ago, when the Olympics started, we were still talking about the unrest in Minneapolis. We were talking about and not that we're not talking about those things anymore, but that was the front and center. And American athletes were getting asked these questions about, what is it like to compete for the USA right now? And we saw over 3 weeks a kind of very clear line being drawn between what's nationalism and what's patriotism. And I think what we saw in the last 3 weeks with these athletes competing was a reflection of patriotism and a reflection of love of country and community that we haven't necessarily seen when people have talked about draping themselves in the flag over the last 2 years. When it has been a political statement, when you see an American flag on the back of a truck and you become in a place where that becomes a red or a blue or a Democrat or a Republican ideology. And what we saw on display through these athletes and through communities coming together around them was this reflection of joy, this reflection of patriotism, where we were able to celebrate USA hockey men's and women, Michaela Schifrin, the US curling team. That stuff came together, and we're able to see that there is still something out there that's able to bring our country together despite how divided we feel.
Right. And potentially also on the world stage, a soft power moment, perhaps. Is it ping pong diplomacy? It may not be that significant, but it's also nice to flex a different side of the United States on the global stage in a moment like this. I think everybody would agree with that.
Absolutely. And I give the athletes credit who were asked those impossible questions, because they didn't ask to be diplomats. They didn't ask to be politicized. I mean, they wanted to go and be able to ski. Like it's not quite like shut up and dribble, but they didn't want to get put into the middle of all of this. And by and large, every comment that I saw or every response that I read to those kind of questions was thoughtful, comprehensive, was delivered with sincerity in a way that I actually don't necessarily see from talking heads on either side of the political aisle when those kind of questions are brought on MS Now or MSNBC, whatever they're calling that station right now, or in other platforms when it's the political pundits that are out there. And hats off to these 23, 24, 25-year-old Gen Z representations of America or representatives of America for being able to find the words that can give us that sense of global leadership that we haven't necessarily had for the last year.
Yes, totally agree with that. Shifting gears, as mentioned at the top, we are recording this in the middle of a blizzard. Luckily, we both have power on our respective sides of the bridge, the Washington Bridge, if you will. That may change. There's obviously a lot of communications pieces that are happening on an internal basis, on an external comms basis. Last night I was watching, for example, Tony Petracca do the weather at 11 o'clock, which I don't usually watch, the weathercast live, but it felt like a moment to do that. That's a level of communication, but there's also a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of internal buzzwords and phrasing that a lot of people probably don't know anything about. So what, in a moment like this, what comes to mind for you about what the general public should know or could know if they're curious about weather comms?
Yeah, I mean, these are some of the hardest things. Like these kind of weather events, they're not quite unexpected, but they're also not necessarily planned for in that moment. You do advanced planning, you do tabletops and all of that to get yourself ready for it, making sure. And right now we're talking about this kind of in the lens of being an executive elected leader, a mayor, a governor, an agency director. You do a lot of advanced planning for it, but you don't know when these things are going to come up. You typically have 48 to 72 hours to begin to actually put the plans in and be able to shift from the things that are on your planned to-do list or your task list that you do on a day in, day out, or that you put into your editorial calendar. And then that gets blown up and you've got to start focusing on this. And through a lot of this, your listeners will hear acronyms like the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, or Emergency Operation Command. That's where a good portion of the in-the-moment decision-making is made. When I was in government, that was typically held at the Rhode Island National Guard and the REMA, the Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency, dual headquarters in Cranston. In that building at any given time during a response like this, you would have public information officers from key departments. Oftentimes the Department of Health would be there. The Department of Transportation would be there. We'd oftentimes have a representative from Rhode Island Commerce to be able to engage with the business community. Then you'd have operational leads. You'd have folks that were able to identify and understand kind of the logistics of government, who did scheduling for, and not scheduling for principals, but scheduling for the way that you would kind of deploy resources throughout the response to clearing roads, ensuring that people's social services were being able to be met, ensuring that there were contingencies. We would always have representatives from the big utilities in the room there. And in that, the reason you have everybody kind of together in that place is that you're able to have eyes on each other, and everybody's given a specific role. And what we often talked about, and we've talked about this before in kind of crisis response, we would make sure that there were spokespeople and that there were communications strategists or communications leaders when thinking about the communications response. Because we didn't necessarily want when we would do these, we'd have both the communications director and the press secretary from the governor or the mayor's office. And the rationale for that was we wanted the communications director to be able to be laser focused on getting information in and being able to create and adapt what the strategic plan would be in terms of sharing information, because there can be a place where you share too much because you want to make sure that the most important messages: stay off the roads, check in on your neighbors, don't turn on a propane heater in your basement. Those type of things resonate with the key constituencies. But there's a lot of other things to have to be able to communicate internally or to other decision leaders. So the mass public doesn't necessarily need to hear about what the specific small business outreach plan is, but we're going to have that communications director and some of the other strategists around them be able to craft what that communications plan would be to local chambers of commerce and local business associations, the things that don't necessarily make the governor's media briefing update that they do every 3 hours with local media. So that's a big component of it. The spokesperson ends up being the one that they're answering the on-the-fly questions. And the important thing in those moments are you never want to give things that are, you don't want to say parking ban is going to lift at this time. You don't want to say until you know that that you've weathered the storm, until you know that you've gotten to that place. because then you end up going backwards and have to recorrect or re-engage, and you have confusion that's out there. And that's what's one of the most important things of this is avoiding the opportunity for confusion. People are stuck at home. People don't really have anywhere else to go. They're scrolling their phones. They're watching TV. Giving them periodic updates is really, really important. You've got a captive audience. And that's why these things are such important opportunities for leadership branding for elected officials. And it's something where when you think about like Deval Patrick in the vest that he used to go out in anytime that there was a major weather event or there was an emergency management response that was necessary, those are the chances that elected officials have to be able to introduce a side of them that constituents don't necessarily get. But in doing it well, they've got to be able to show that command of what is happening in between those briefings. Are they asking their leadership team the right questions? Are they engaging on social media the right way so that people are getting answers to questions that they have that are relevant and important and not getting sidetracked on minutia?
Completely agree. And then, of course, there's also the balance of what is urgent, extreme information and what isn't. I'll note this, that about 5:20 yesterday, I was on a phone call, I had my AirPods on, and all of a sudden the emergency alert came through, blasting, it took my head off. And, I looked at it, and of course, no doubt, this is a major snowstorm. There are major implications here. No doubt a travel ban is significant, and all of that is very true. I also thought to myself, I'm not sure about the timing of this because now it's literally an hour and change away from the travel ban. And that type of engagement seems best used when, hey, active shooter in area, incoming tornado. So it's a fine line, but I also get my mom was very glad that they sent out the alert. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's it. I'll disagree with you a little bit there. I think that there's the fact that we have these tools, which didn't actually exist to the same degree when I was in government 8 years ago. Wow, it's hard to believe that it's been that long since I've been in some of these rooms. But we didn't have that accessibility to be able to do that push notification. And those things are really important. And I do think, in fact, we haven't had 24 inches of snow hit Rhode Island at least since 2015 in one storm. So being able to, and people knew that the storm was coming, but I do think that there wasn't necessarily the understand, because it was only 72 hours ago that some of the forecasts were saying this is going to be 6 inches, or this might be enough to be able to bring a parking ban together, but things will get back to normal. I mean, I'm looking out my window right now. I can't see across the street. I went to take my dog out this morning. He couldn't get out the door. So this is a much, much bigger storm. And I think that the forecast was rapidly changing to a degree that those who were not paying as close attention as someone like you who's on a news broadcast on a daily basis, they might not know that it's going to be as significant and that it's going to come on as quickly as it did, because this was a type of storm. I was actually out on the road. I dropped my niece off at her apartment in Providence around 6:45 and was driving back just as the snow came. By the time I walked into my house, it was coming down to that degree that if you had a 35, 40-minute drive, you were going to get hit with something a little bit more than probably what you anticipated. So I disagree on that. This did feel like one of the right times to be able to use that. But it is something to what you said of, you can't hit that buzzer multiple times in the storm, because then people start to tune it out, or people change their settings on their phone. So you need to have that judicious, that cautious use of the technology or the platforms available to you, so that you don't fall into a trap of being in a bit of a sky is falling mentality.
Right. Well, that makes sense. And I totally understand what you're saying. And you're right that as even looking right now at the most recent predictions here, I mean, we're not even necessarily close to through with this storm. So it is an evolving, problematic and major storm, no question about it. And that judgment call, like you said, you've got one time to use it. Better use it well. One time to use it initially. You can't tease it.
Right. And that's it. Like, you can't use that for a tune into our press conference for additional information. Like, you've got to have, if you're going to use something of that level, and even when you use the press conferences, you need to be able to make clear you're sharing important information, that you've got something that is either actionable or is a true update. Now, once you're in the storm, so that's kind of the pre-storm stuff that you're doing. Once you're in the storm, then you really do want to take advantage of that, communicating when you're going to communicate. And what we used to do in the Raimondo administration, and I've seen Mayor Smiley and Governor McKee and others use this as well. It's not something that any office or any individual leader invented themselves, is you make clear you've got a noon press conference, say. You share all the information that you have there. We currently have a travel ban. We have this many plow trucks that are out on the roads. We've seen this many power outages, and there are this many crews out there working to restore power. You share that information. You then close with, our next update will be at X time, at which time we will provide any new information. You don't tell them, like, you don't tease anything and say, at noon, we're going to give you, it's not like teasing The Apprentice the way that the Trump administration does some of their public communications. And then you answer, and you make the point to answer every question that media has there. Because media is not in that moment, at least in my experience, with the exception of a couple of non-professional outlets or folks that are looking to make a name for themselves. By and large, I have not seen anyone ask a gotcha question in the middle of a response. That typically happens, or those kind of questions typically come in the aftermath. Once the snow has stopped, once you're a handful of hours away from when people expect the road should have been reopened. So in those moments, when the snow is still falling, when you're still in the middle of the weather event, you're answering every single question that media has. Exhaust them. Yeah. Get to that point where all of the reporters are going around the room kind of looking at each other awkwardly of like, I think I'm out of questions. Do you have anything else? And then you're able to go on to the next. You're able to say, all right, we'll see you in 4 hours, or we'll see you tomorrow morning, and be able to move into that direction. Where it really gets tricky, and ultimately these things, that no one really ever gets overly trapped or necessarily trips while the snow is falling, unless you have a Don Carcieri moment where you were overseas and didn't tell anybody, and you're not even able to get to the press conference, or a Dan McKee moment where you're at a basketball court when the bridge is being shut down. Those are the type of moments that you really missed the ball in the moment, or when the actual snow is falling or rain is coming down or action is being taken. Where you see people get tripped up, or where you see organizations get into places, what happens when the event is wrapping up and you're in the quote unquote digging out phase. And this is one where, and I think for leaders today, it's almost a little bit unfair, because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have social media as prevalent as it was, showing clips of how Alberta, Canada cleans up a snowstorm with equipment that no Northeast American city is going to have. Because the type of storms that we're getting today, like, we get snow, we get cold. We don't typically get 24 hours in one storm in the way that Buffalo with lake effect snow does, or Alberta, Canada in the mountains does. We get 4 to 8 inches of snow in any given snowstorm. And then we typically get 36, 37, 38 degrees thereafter. That's relatively easy to clean up. So the social media memes that you have of these monster snow plows that they have in Yosemite National Park cleaning up put Governor McKee, Mayor Smiley, Mayor Grebian at a disadvantage with their constituents, because you're already having to now explain why you can't do those things that they do in these other places.
That's right.
Then put on top of that, the expectation has changed. mean, when I first moved back up to New England in 2012, you still had the parking spot wars in Providence and Southie and other places where you would go after the storm was done because they didn't necessarily call for a parking ban to get cars off the street because there's really no place to put them. So the plows would come in, they'd plow in whatever cars, and then you got out there with your shovel and you dug your car out and you took someone's used golf clubs and stuck them in that spot until March, and that was your spot. Now, the expectation has changed. Mayors over time in New England cities have talked in grand detail about my plan to be able to plow curb to curb, or even in some cases, sidewalk to sidewalk. And that expectation setting is putting them now in these positions where if it's not cleared down to pavement, melted snow with a 6-foot pathway to be able to walk within 12 hours of the snow stopping, they have to then spend a week and a half of political capital to be able to restore where their credibility was. And it really, I'm all for the need to have multimodal. They need to be able to have our sidewalks clear so that our kids can get to school, so that people with wheelchairs are able to traverse now. But there is a resident responsibility. There is a constituent responsibility to be able to do some aspects of that. And it's the expectation that a city government or a state government or a town government is going to come in and shovel the sidewalk in front of your house to that width, and that all you need to do is half-ass it with an 18-inch thing with the plastic shovel that you got at Benny's 15 years ago to be able to allow people to get to school. That's not sufficient. Like, that is when we all have constituent responsibilities to be able to help our communities weather through these storms.
Well said, and I agree that there's a level of shared community that gets exposed on either side of this issue. I did see here in Elmwood, for what it's worth, and Elmwood, by the way, one of the areas where the snow removal was pretty much taken care of in real time. Not a lot of problems out here, and a lot of that had to do with literally my neighbors who had multiple snow shovels, my partner who had a giant thing to clean trucks off the top, whatever. We actually took care of each other. Our community kind of came together. And I think that allowed for at least the perception that, hey, this block is a lot more clear and clean because in tandem with the state plowing the main road, Elmwood Avenue, and the city plowing the side roads and neighbors taking care of their area, we did pretty well while a lot of the rest of the city really did suffer through that last storm.
Yeah, there's a lot. I always thought, growing up, the big weather events were the things that did bring you together with neighbors, and it was the thing where you would see. And I grew up in the DC suburbs. We didn't get nearly as much snow as we get up here, but typically, anytime New England gets hit with a storm, the Mid-Atlantic got some smaller version of it. So we had blizzards growing up. We had 18 inches of snow fall in single events, and you would see neighbors coming together with their shovels to dig up the driveways to be able to let everybody be able to get out, to clear whatever sidewalk so the kids could get to the place. And it's in some ways, frankly, how we met some of our neighbors. It's how we got to know the extended families over there. And there is something that's kind of and maybe it's Pollyanna of me, but there is something that we were just talking about the Olympics earlier, those things that bring people together and that bring community together. The shared event, everybody in Rhode Island right now is grappling with the fact that it's still actively snowing and there's between 12 and 18 inches of snow that's already fallen, and no one can get their car out of their driveway unless they've got some real pimped out Wrangler that is able to be that much higher than the snow. So we're all kind of in hoodies on conference calls today, and we're rocking sweatpants and slippers as we go into our meetings. It's a shared experience. And we don't get many of those in 2026. So I say lean into it, figure out what you can do to be able to help it. Obviously, have high expectations of your public officials, but don't expect them to do something that they can't do. We cannot have the same kind of 10-foot tall snowblower that Yosemite National Park has to clear Badger Pass after 6 months of snowfall. We just don't have that, and we shouldn't expect to have it because then our taxes would be through the roof. So give some folks some grace. This is a once in a decade. I've been back in Rhode Island for 13 years at this stage. I've not seen a storm like this since I've been back here.
Yeah.
This is a once in a decade, once in a generation level amount of snowfall that's falling. So give the elected officials who are doing it some grace. Don't start complaining that you're not sidewalk to sidewalk on Thursday, because it's not going to happen unless you get out there with your own shovel and clear your yard and clear your sidewalk and then knock on your neighbor's door and ask them why they haven't done theirs.
Completely agree with that. Let's be respectful. And folks, I want to give an update right now. I just got an email that our Bartholomew Town live podcast scheduled for Tuesday of this week at Johnson Wales University has been postponed. We'll give you the new date for that. And anybody who has tickets or anything like that, obviously you'll be honored. That's coming through right now. Snow day realities. I mean, I think that's the kind of stuff that also we're getting hopefully a little better at. I look to New York, Mayor Mamdani saying, you know what, we're going to shut things down. Kids, it's an actual snow day. We're not going to do remote learning today. Take a step back and enjoy the day off to some extent as best as you can.
I want to give a lot of the school districts in Rhode Island credit for that too. I know there was a lot of talk after COVID of, there's not going to be snow days anymore. Credit to the districts for not trying to force kids in front of a screen and force teachers to turn on a dime and be able to have lesson plans and go back into virtual classroom management. I mean, my kids were complaining yesterday that this might now mean an extra day tacked on at the end of the year in June. We'll figure that stuff out later. Like, hats off to the districts for not trying to shoehorn something in that would end up being a lost learning day anyway, and give kids the opportunity to stay in their pajamas, to be able to watch some TV, to maybe open up a book and read a book. Like I'm pleased that we're not necessarily going down the route of forcing kids to work a 9 to 5. And because frankly, until all of us knew what Zoom was, even us adults would have a day off today.
That's right. Completely agree. Mike Raia.
Hey, I got a question for you while we're going, like before we wrap up, like with all the snow falling, you're a native Rhode Islander. What's your favorite sledding hill growing up?
Oh man. I'll give you this one. It's if you're at the University of Rhode Island out in front of, by the big tall building, the Chafee Center, there's an amazing hill. That's where I used to go as a little kid. And honestly though, the best sledding spot in the state no longer exists to my knowledge. That was my childhood home that I grew up in. We would have speaking of the Olympics, I wanted to be an Olympic luge performer or whatever you'd call it, luge athlete, because I set up a luge course through the ice out in the woods of Charlestown, Fantasyland out there. Unfortunately, not accessible anymore, but it was the greatest, I believe.
That stinks. Well, anyone who's over on the east side, one of the things that we miss about living over there was the hill at Wheeler School, or at Moses Brown.
Yeah, totally.
Straight down onto the softball field there. You'd hit a couple of jumps. I remember going there, running into Ed Fitzpatrick's kids and running into Governor Raimondo's son with our kids, and everybody kind of having the competition to see if anyone could beat any of the dads in terms of how much air they were able to get on any of the jumps. So Tuesday, if school's canceled again and you're on the east side of Providence, get yourself over to MB.
It's the only way to do it. Mike Raia, Half Street Group, halfstreetgroup.com. As always, we go inside communications every month right here on Bartholomew Town. Mike, thanks so much for your insights and your time.
Thanks, Bill. Be safe out there.
Bartholomew Town here for you every Tuesday and Thursday, wherever you get podcasts, and of course, ripodcast.com. And we're brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online. Are you ready to take the next step in your career? At URI Online, we offer business and leadership-focused programs designed to fit your life. Whether your goal is to advance your career in fields like public administration, supply chain management, or training and development, our programs are online and they provide the flexibility you need with the high-quality education you deserve. Learn from experienced faculty and collaborate with a network of professionals, all from the comfort of your home or wherever life takes you. Learn more at uri.edu/online. URI Online, learn anywhere with us. I'm Bill Bartholomew. Stay safe, folks, throughout this storm, and we will be back with more later this week.